Thank you so much for joining us for another Cumberland Family Academy session. Cumberland Family Academy is a program of Cumberland County Schools. Our goal is to provide families with information and resources to support the education of their children. So let's go right into today's session, already in progress.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Before we logged on, we were chatting and I was told that someone said, I need help helping my child with math. And I'm hoping by the end of this, you all are going to feel comfortable and prepared to help your child with math and realize that it's not so scary. Math is actually a lot of fun. So our expected outcomes for today's session is first, we're going to talk about what the goal of the session is. And then we're going to really look at some strategies that are going to foster critical thinking and problem solving for your children. We're going to talk a little bit about some things we can do to support homework, and then how we can make math a really fun family affair at home. So what is the goal of this session? Let's talk about that for a minute. Whether you realize it or not, math is ingrained in our daily lives. Math can be interactive and it can be fun. And with just a few tools of the trade, you can support your child at home quite easily. So that's really our goal for this session, is so you walk away having some ideas of how you can support your child at home. Why is it important for families to be involved in their child's educational process? So when families are involved in their child's educational process, typically students tend to earn higher grades. They tend to attend school more regularly. They tend to take more rigorous courses when they get to high school. They tend to graduate at higher rates when the families are involved. And all of those things also help them to leave school better prepared to succeed in college and in their careers. So I want you to close your eyes for a second. And I want you to just picture in your mind when you were an elementary age student in school. How did you learn math? Just take a second and think about that. Now open your eyes and look at this picture. I don't know how old you are. Maybe the hair didn't look quite this way, but did you have a similar looking classroom where there were problems on the board? We would go work out problems. We all sat in our rows, and the teacher was the center of the lesson. It was very teacher directed, very teacher led. Now I want you to think about, how do we want our kids to learn math? Look at the picture with this section and just compare the two. What do you see that's a little bit different? You can type some thoughts in the chat if you'd like. What is different about this right side of the screen from the left side of the screen? What do you see? Peer teaching. Oh, great. They're working together, aren't they? They're collaborating together. The teacher is not the center of the world in these pictures, are they? The children are. More fun visual content on the right. That's right. It just looks more fun, doesn't it? It looks more interactive, more hands-on. We want our kids, now I will tell you, with COVID, we are sometimes back to some rows because of social distancing and things like that. But even with that, we want to make sure that we make math as interactive and as student-centered as possible. That's really our goal now when we're talking about how we want our kids to learn math. It's about the children, not the teachers, okay? I see, yeah, group work, they're working with peers. So I just want to show you a quick little video, and then we're going to talk about it in just a second.
Some people think I'm not good at math. I can never do anything. I'm not good at it. I'm just going to give up.
A lot of people think of it as like prison, like you don't have any freedom.
Okay, time to go to your notebook. Okay, read chapter 1. Okay, here's your worksheet.
The math textbook is kind of like the Bible.
you have to kind of worship the textbook, and I don't really like that.
Everybody's going so quickly, and I thought if I didn't go quick, people think I'm like not smart.
I made a lot of mistakes, and I got really sad about it.
You make a mistake, you're pretty much done. Yeah.
I can't do it fast, and they're so smart because they can, and I'm not smart, and I just kind of stopped.
You feel like you're serving a sentence for like nothing.
I love it. That does look like a cuboid.
Oh, we got it!
I've done better with math when I was talking with people, sharing ideas.
4 or 5 brains work better than one.
I'll see it one way, but then someone else will see it another way, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
I love that we're getting different answers out because lots of problems in math, there are different answers.
Have more than one way to solve the question.
Because in real life, you're not gonna just do one thing. You're gonna do many things. You're gonna need to use different methods.
Yay!
No, hold on. Take your time and just experiment with every way that could possibly work.
You definitely have to be patient because certain problems, they take forever.
Math isn't about speed, and you can make mistakes and you learn from them.
Yeah, I did that too!
Yes! Told you!
Math isn't like the enemy, and it can't hurt me.
You can run wild, you can pass ideas by each other.
I thought that math was all about right answers and wrong. Now that I believe that math is really about ideas and creativity, it's a lot more inspiring.
Okay, so I love that video because I really do think it's a great visual representation of what we want math to feel like in our schools here at Cumberland County. I'm not gonna, this is just rhetorical, but I want you to think about this. Have you ever heard somebody, or maybe you've said one of these statements or something similar to this? I was never good in math, so I guess he or she gets it from me. I don't blame him or her. There is too much to memorize. This grade is unacceptable. She or he made straight A's in math last year, and I expect the same this year. I can't tell you how many times I hear people tell me I'm not a math person or I'm not good at math. And it's funny to me because I think there is a stigma in our society with not being good with reading. We would never advertise to the world with a smile on our face that I'm bad at reading or I can't read. But for some reason, it's socially acceptable to say that I'm bad at math. And so one thing that we want to do, and for our children, is to not say things like that, because we don't want them to think that math is hard, that math is inaccessible to them. We want them to understand that math is for everybody. Whether we think we're math people or not, we're all math people. We do so much math throughout the day that we don't even realize. You might not want to be a math person, but I guarantee you probably are a math person, even if you don't think you are. So we're going to talk a lot about, this is something, I don't know if you've heard of this before, but this is a big movement in education and the idea of a growth mindset. And so I have one more video, and then I promise this is the last video, but I think it's a powerful video, and it really does a great job of explaining what growth mindset is. And then we're going to focus on what that might look like in our math classrooms.
Did you know there's a powerful relationship between what we believe about how we learn and our actual achievement? Dr. Carol Dweck studies students' beliefs about intelligence. What she found is that students generally hold one of two very different beliefs about intelligence. Some students have what she calls a fixed mindset. This is the belief that intelligence is a fixed trait that doesn't change much. So like eye color, these students believe you're born with a certain amount of intelligence and there's not much you can do to change it. Other students have a very different belief about intelligence. They have a growth mindset. They see intelligence more like a muscle. They understand that when you put in effort, you can get smarter. What we now know from study after study is that the more students have a growth mindset and believe that they can grow their intelligence, the better they do in school. Students with a growth mindset do better in school because they approach learning differently than students with a fixed mindset. For students with a fixed mindset, their goal in school is to show how smart they are, or hide how dumb they think they are. This makes sense, right? If you think you're just born smart or dumb, you want to make sure you show that you are smart. So this makes fixed mindsetters much less likely to ask questions in class or seek out help from peers or teachers, because that would involve showing that they don't know something. Students with a growth mindset, on the other hand, have the goal to learn, so they're more likely to ask a question if they don't understand, or to seek out help, or try a new strategy if they are struggling. When it comes to the amount of effort you have to put forth, students with a fixed mindset and students with a growth mindset see that differently as well. Those with a fixed mindset actually see effort as proof of low ability. They think that if you have to try hard, that means you aren't very smart. Whereas students with a growth mindset see effort as the way that you get smarter. How students react when they are faced with a challenge or setback in their learning is what really differentiates those with a fixed mindset and those with a growth mindset. Students with a fixed mindset will think that they are not smart and will likely give up on a task. Those with a growth mindset tend to work harder because they see it as an opportunity to learn and grow their intelligence. So if we can all grow our intelligence, are we saying that all students have equal ability? We aren't saying that everyone has the same level of intelligence. Having a growth mindset doesn't mean that you believe everyone has equal ability in every subject matter. It also doesn't mean that we believe some students aren't more talented in certain subjects than others. It means that you believe that no matter where a person is now, they can always improve with effort, good strategies, and help. And that's the number one piece of information you should take away from this lesson. No matter where a person is now, they can always improve with effort, good strategies, and help.
We want to hear from you. Have you heard of Cumberland Family Academy? We have a program here in Cumberland County Schools that is specifically for our families. We want to continue providing you with information and resources to help you become full partners in the education of your young people. So, what we need you to do is visit our website and complete a brief survey. As we're thinking about programs and information sessions and offerings for families, we want to hear from you. What topics would be most helpful to you? What would you like to see? What times should we offer them? We want to tailor our resources and information sessions and everything for families around what you need and what you desire. I promise it will only take 10 to 15 minutes. Visit the link below, complete a brief survey, and help us help you help your child succeed in school and ultimately in life. Thank you.
Okay. So now that we've talked, we kind of watched that video about what a growth mindset is, let's think about it in terms of math. Math is about connections and it's about communicating. Math is a very social subject. I don't know if you realize that, but we should be doing a lot of talking during math. In math, mistakes are very valuable. We learn so much from our mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. Questions in math are really important. Again, that's how we learn, but we're also going to talk today about some questions that you can kind of ask at home that will help kind of spark your children's thinking and get them thinking a little more critically. In math, it's important that they realize that math is about not just getting the right answer, it's about being creative. It's about making sense of things and using their reasoning and their justifications. And depth in math is more important than speed. I know growing up, I had to take time tests, and we were always doing flashcard work, and you had this amount of minutes to get all of your facts right, and that fosters that what we call math anxiety. And we've kind of in our society, we've kind of created this misconception that math is about getting the answer as quickly as possible, but that's not what math is at all. Depth is more important than speed in math. So what are some strategies that we can use at home as parents or family members to foster critical thinking and problem solving at home with our children? One thing we can do is we can be really strategic about our questioning. On balance, low-level questioning aimed at recall and fundamental level comprehension will plateau children's learning quickly. And higher-level questions can produce deeper learning and thinking. But we really need a balance. A balance needs to be struck because both types of questions have a place in learning, and it really we get the most bang for our buck when we kind of mix them up. A mixture of those questions is what we recommend. So here are some questions that you could ask your child when they're working on an assignment at home, or maybe you're playing a game and there's some math involved, like Yahtzee or something with dominoes or what have you. Here's some questions that you could ask that's going to foster that critical thinking. What do you notice? Just very simple question, but what do you notice? Tell me what you notice. What do you wonder? What question do you have when you look at this problem? Why does that work? So they solve a problem, instead of just saying, yep, you got it right, ask them, tell me why that works. Why does that make sense? Make them talk about it. Remember, we said math is a social thing. We want them to be talking. We want them to communicate. A lot of our students who do very well in math, or who we typically consider good math students, can solve problems, but they can't always explain what they did, which makes you wonder, are they really understanding what they're doing, or are they just following a bunch of procedures and steps? We want them to be able to tell us why that worked, why that makes sense. And those explanations should be based on what they know about math. You could ask them, hey, can you show me your thinking in a drawing? That's another one that we think of drawing as a lower level skill, but to be able to draw a model takes some thinking. Again, they need to understand the concept to be able to model that concept. And so that's a great way to kind of decide, okay, are they just getting the answer because they've memorized this step that they need to take, or do they really understand what they're doing? You could ask them, how does that method connect to another method? Like maybe they did something different last week, or maybe you show them a different strategy, or they have their journals and you see a different strategy in their journals. You could ask them to make a connection from one to the other. Math is really exciting because it's just chock full of patterns and connections and relationships. And so it's important. We want our kids to not only see math, we don't want them to see it in isolation. We want them to recognize how what they're doing now has a connection to something else in math, or something maybe they talked about or did before. So let's talk for a minute about what it means to be fluent in math. Fluency is a word that, remember we said about speed, we typically in the past, historically, we think to be fluent in math, that means we're fast. But the word fluent means a lot more than just speed. In math, when we say we want them to be fluent, we want them to be flexible, which means that they can look for different relationships, different connections. We want them to be efficient. That's where some of that speed comes in, but efficient is more than just speed. It means that you are choosing a strategy that's going to get you where you need to go in the shortest amount of time. But if my most efficient method might not be the same as someone else's efficient method, and my most efficient method may change over time as I understand more. And then the third part of fluency is accuracy. We do want them to be able to get the right answer. But again, fluency is a combination of all of three of those things: flexibility, efficiency, and accuracy. So one thing that you've probably, or you may have heard your child talk about, or maybe a teacher talk about, are number talks. I wanted to show you a quick example of a number talk. So I'm going to show you in just a second a number expression. And I want you to just think about how I want you to solve it in your head, because number talks are all about mental math. But I want you to look at the number expression when I show it to you, and I want you to think about what the sum would be. Okay, here we go. Take a look at that number expression. So I've written this expression down on my board. It might be backwards. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but one way that I might have solved this was to go from left to right. I could say, okay, 3 plus 8 is 11. 11 plus 7 is 18. And then 18 plus 2 more would give me that 20. Okay. That's one way I could solve it. Is that the only way I could solve it, though? So in school, number talks are, we ask the kids to share their strategies, and if this were an actual classroom, I would be writing down what the children are saying, and we'd be sharing our strategies with each other. But as the teacher, I probably have a purpose to my number talk. There's some kind of strategy I want to talk about. And today I want to talk about making tens, because tens are what we call friendly numbers. They're easy to work with. Typically adding with tens seems to be easy for most people. So I see 3, I see 8, I see a 7 and a 2. What two numbers could I put together to make a 10? I could put 7 and 3 together. Okay, is that the only thing I can put? Oh, and 8 plus 2 would also give me 10. So again, there's nothing wrong with going left to right, but it's not the only way I can solve this. There are other ways for me to solve this. Oh, thank you. Let's see. 8 plus 2 equals 10, plus 7 is 17, because 10 is easy to add with, isn't it? So, okay, I had my 10, but then I can add the 7 to that and get 17, and then I know 3 more is going to give me the 20. Thank you. Now, if we were in class, you would tell me that verbally, and I would have written exactly what you just typed in the chat box for everyone to see. So thank you for doing that, so we could all see your thinking. Did any of you can type yes or no, did any of you try to look for tens this time after the last one we just did? Was that something your brain started to do? Yeah. Okay, some of us did. Another part of number talks that makes it so great for building fluency is that, I always do, is that not only are we thinking about those expressions in isolation, but they even though if I just looked at them quickly, they don't, other than the fact that we're adding 4 numbers, they don't look like they have anything to do with each other, but they really do, don't they? And what we want kids to start to notice are patterns that they can then learn strategies and apply them to new situations. And so these are kinds of things that we can also help at home, or you could ask the question of like, what strategy did you use, and see what your kids say, because they might tell you I made a 10. In class, they're going to actually name these strategies, and a lot of our teachers are making anchor charts that they have on the wall. And then when they're doing some problem solving, sometimes kids will say, well, I made a 10, and they explain those same strategies that we talk about during number talks. So we could just do number talks all day for the hour, but we better move on. So, but they're really a lot of fun, and it's a kind of a safe way for kids to be flexible in their thinking. They learn from each other, and it's just a lot of fun. All right, so before we move on from this slide, I just want you to think, these are rhetorical, but I want you to think about this. What thinking is required in an activity like this? And how is a number talk or something similar to a number talk, how is that different from just using like flashcards? Okay, so let's talk about some strategies to foster critical thinking and problem solving, because one thing that our kids tend to struggle with in math are word problems. So I'll tell you right up front, I never call them word problems. I always call them story problems. And I know that sounds like a silly little difference, but you know, there might only have 3 or 4 sentences, but most of those word problems have a character or 2 in them. Most of those characters are doing something. And sometimes where the misconceptions happen or where the mistakes happen in solving problems is that we're not paying attention to the context. So I'm going to show you some strategies that you can use to slow your kids down and to focus more on the context and not so much on just pulling out numbers. Because what they do is they see the numbers, and if we've been multiplying lately, I'm just going to multiply those numbers. If we've been adding in class lately, I'm just going to add those numbers. And we don't think about the story itself or the context. So let's talk about that. Another thing kids do sometimes is they pick out keywords that they say, oh, it says in all, so I'm going to add. And they don't even think about the story. Well, sometimes in all does mean to add, but sometimes it means to subtract. Sometimes it means to multiply. So again, it's about getting them to slow down and think about the story, think about the context. So I'm going to give you a couple little strategies that I'll call these secrets of the trade. This is what a lot of our teachers are doing that you can easily do at home as well. So first of all, let's just talk about some basic things. One thing, again, this is kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Ask your child, always ask them to explain why and to explain how. It's not just about getting the answer, it's how you got that answer. It's why you know this answer makes sense. Ask your child to represent his or her thinking using a model. That might be something they're touching. And we're going to talk a little bit about things we have around the house that we could use for math to model. Those could also be picture models, drawings. Remember I said it's a social content area. We want to use our words, whether that be in speaking or writing, journaling. We want to be able to explain our thinking in words. And then depending on the grade and depending on the standard that we're working on, many times the ultimate goal is to be able to express that in an equation. And again, depending on the grade level, like some of our younger grades might not be ready for that piece yet, but that's where we're going to work toward eventually as they progress. Another thing you can do is to ask your child to represent their thinking in more than one way. Okay, they got it right. They wrote out an equation, they got it right. Can you show me that in another way? Can you show me your thinking using a drawing or a model? And sometimes kids can do that very easily. Sometimes that really kind of trips them up a little bit because they don't actually understand what they're doing. They're just following a bunch of steps. And that's going to help us down the road. If we can kind of catch that, we can support that thinking and work through that thinking. And that's going to help them as the math becomes more rigorous and the numbers increase. And as they get into some of those older grades, they'll have a solid foundation from what they did in the elementary grades. We can ask our child to become the teachers. You know, I don't know about you. I like to tell people I'm 21, but I don't think anyone believes that anymore. When I was in school, look, we learned math differently. It's different. Sometimes we as parents, I think, feel ill-equipped to support our kids with math because that's not how we learn. We don't have that experience. So you know what? tell your child to become the teacher. Ask them to teach you how to do that strategy. Ask them to teach you how to do that math. It kind of empowers them and it makes them get to be the teacher, which is fun. And promote that growth mindset by allowing your child to productively struggle. There's a thin line between productive struggle and unproductive struggle. What we don't want to happen is for kids to shut down and to cry and to break down. What we do want to happen is for them to have to think about it. And if it's easy for them, then it's not really a problem. They're not problem solving. If they have to do some struggle, some productive struggle and think through it, that's where all those little synapses are going to go off in our brains and they're going to learn more. It's going to help them before we go in and rescue them as parents, as family members, as teachers. We don't want to see our kids struggling. We want them to succeed and we want them to have success, not failure. But sometimes we go in and we rescue them because we don't want them to have to struggle. And then we're taking that learning process away from them. So before you go in and show them how to solve a problem, let them think through it a little bit. Let them struggle through it a little bit. Okay, so I told you I was going to give you some secrets of the trade. This is something you may have seen hanging on a teacher's wall if you've been in Cumberland County schools. I know lately because of COVID that's not been possible, but this is a strategy that we use all over the county. It's called the stop sign strategy. And here's the secret. It's just a fancy, silly way to get kids to slow down and to think about the context. So here's our problem. And we're going to look at it in just a second. But before we do, we're going to go through the steps of this stop sign strategy. So I'm going to kind of model this and show you how it works. The first step for the stop sign strategy is to read the entire problem, but we're not going to solve anything yet. We're just going to read through the problem. So I'm going to read this to you. You can read along with me. Some pies are left over from Mandy's dinner party. The apple pie has 3/4 left over, and the lemon pie has 5/12 left over. Which pie has more left over? That's the first step, just to read through the problem. And then remember those questions that you could ask your child? Here's 2 of them. What do you notice? Oh, the word leftover. There's something has been left over. Yes, there's some leftovers. Did you notice anything else? What do you wonder? Do you have any questions? What do you wonder about this problem? What do you wonder? The denominators are multiples of each other. So that's something you notice, that 4 and 12, those 2 denominators, they have a relationship, don't they? Once we just take a second and talk about the problem a little bit, now let's move on to that next step of our problem. And we're actually going to do these next 3 steps kind of in tandem. So the second step is to reread the problem. And every time we come to a comma, a period, a question mark, the word and or the word but, we're going to put our hands up and we're going to say stop. And kids enjoy this. You can be silly about it. I do something with kids called whisper screaming, which is kind of obnoxious, but it's whispering. So you're not really bothering anyone, but you go stop. You know, they think that's fun, but you can kind of make it fun like that. So whenever we come to these parts, we're going to say stop. Now, what we're doing, little side note as parents, what we're doing is we're chunking the problem, and what we're going to do next is every time we say stop, we're going to make notes. We're going to draw pictures if we need to. We're going to highlight or underline or circle anything that's important mathematically in that part of the sentence. And then we're going to repeat those steps until we've reread the entire problem. So that's why all 3 of these kind of go together. So let's go through this together. Some pies are left over from Mandy's dinner party. Stop. So that's my first stop because there's a period there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at that part and say, okay, is there anything important that to help us mathematically, or is this just kind of to help us understand the story? Well, I did notice, and someone put this in the chat earlier, there are some leftovers. There are some, I don't know how many, but there are some pies that are left over from this party. Okay. Let's continue reading. The apple pie has 3/4 left over, and there's that word and, so I'm going to stop. And now let's talk about this. What do you see in this part of the problem? The apple pie has 3/4 left over. Okay. All right. So now let's keep reading. The lemon pie has 5/12 left over. Stop. Okay. What do we notice in this part of the problem? The lemon pie has 5/12 left over. Okay. Which pie has more left over? Stop. Well, that's the question that we need to answer at the end. And one thing I do notice is that word more. So we're looking for which one has more left over. Okay, so we've gone through these 3 steps, but before we move on to solving the problem, another really great strategy you can use at home to help them build their reasoning and critical thinking is to ask them what a reasonable estimate would be. So, for example, if I were to look at this problem and I'm trying to know what would be a reasonable estimate if I need to figure out which one has more, I can look at these fractions and I can use some of my benchmark understanding of fractions and some reasoning. For example, I see this fraction for apple pie is 3/4, and I know that 2/4 is the same as half of the pie. And so 3/4 is like one more piece than half of the pie. So that's like one more than half. And now I'm looking at the lemon pie, and this fraction is 5/12. And I know that 6/12 is half of a pie. 6/12 is equivalent to 1/2. And so this is actually one less piece than a half. So without doing any actual math, I kind of think that the answer is going to be apple pie because it looks like there are more than half of the apple pie has been left over and less than half of the lemon pie has been left over. So we haven't actually done any computation yet, but we're reasoning about it. So now it's time to actually solve the problem. So you would let the kids go through and solve that problem, and then go ask them to check their answer to see if it makes sense. And that's an important thing. And if you took that time to make a reasonable estimate before they started solving, they can compare their answer to their estimate. Okay, this is what we thought was reasonable. Does our answer make sense? Another strategy to help foster critical thinking with problem solving would be, this is a really fun one. This is called numberless word problems. So it is exactly what it sounds like. You basically take the numbers out. So let me read this problem to you. Abby has been saving money for a new laptop. Computer City has the laptop she wants on sale for $680. So far, she has saved $458. How much more money will she need? So what we're going to do is we're going to take out the numbers. Remember, I told you kids like to just go straight to those numbers and operate on them. They just do something with them, and they ignore all of that awesome context, that story. Well, guess what? If we take the numbers out, they can't do the math yet. They have to stop and think about the problem. So Abby has been saving money for a new laptop. Computer City has the laptop she wants on sale for some dollars. So far, she has saved some dollars. How much more money will she need? So now the kids don't have anything they can operate on. They have to pay attention to the context. Children can discuss the meaning now of the story more easily and then determine the necessary steps to solve the problem. Then put the numbers back in and have them actually solve it. A very similar strategy would be to change the problem to friendlier numbers. So especially sometimes our numbers, as the kids get older, get kind of big, or we have fractions like our last problem. So let's say instead of putting the word sum, what if we just make these really easy numbers to work with, like 6 and 4? So now let's think about it with those numbers. Abby's been saving money for her laptop. The laptop is on sale for $6. So far, she's saved $4. How much more money does she need? Most of our kids would be able to probably do that in their head. Then you talk about, okay, how did you figure that out? Well, I had to find the difference between 6 and 4. Well, now when we put those bigger numbers in there, they know what to do. They just have to follow those same steps, but this time with the more rigorous computation. So once again, children can discuss the meaning of the story more easily and then determine the necessary steps for solving that problem. So let's talk for now about manipulatives. Manipulatives in math are really important to build concrete understanding. And we always want to move, this comes from Singapore math, CP8. We want to move from concrete to pictorial to abstract. What we don't want to do is start with abstract. We need to build the understanding, the conceptual understanding first, and then build our way toward that abstract understanding. And so manipulatives are a great way for us to really build a strong foundation conceptually with a concrete understanding of what we're doing. And then we move to those drawn models, and then eventually to more abstract equations and being able to explain things in words and things like that. So how can I support my child with their homework? One thing you can do at home is to communicate with your child's teacher about struggles or successes that you're witnessing at home. Don't be afraid to tell your child's teacher that your kid is having trouble with something. Talk to them about it. They're going to be able to support you better if you're communicating with them about those struggles and also about the successes. Most of our teachers send home newsletters, or they send messages through Class Dojo and all those kind of correspondence pieces. Take the time to read those, because a lot of times there's going to be information in those newsletters that might help you about curriculum, math or ELA or science or social studies. Ask your child to prove their thinking by explaining why they know a solution works. Prove that to me. Justify your answer. And it should always be based on math. Their proofs or their justifications should go back to what they know about math. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask your teacher for clarification if something's confusing to you. Like I said, most of us didn't learn math in this way. And so unless you are working in education, some capacity of education, sometimes some of these strategies are just a little foreign to us. So don't be ashamed and don't be afraid to just ask, like, hey, can you just talk me through this strategy real quick? I know that the teachers are, they want us to be a partnership. They want us working together because they need your support. And so don't be afraid to ask for clarification. And then if you go on our website, there are curriculum guides and resources that are available for parents that will help you understand the curriculum a little bit better too. But let's get back to manipulatives. Students at all levels and all abilities can benefit from manipulatives. So I don't care if you have an AIG student or you have an EC student or just a student who's a regular classroom student. It doesn't matter. All students, and guess what? If you have some high school or middle school students at home, they can benefit from it too. We all can benefit from manipulatives. So let's talk about some manipulatives, because we're not all teachers and we don't all have these fancy sets of manipulatives in our homes. But what we can do is we can find some things around our house that we can use to kind of replicate or replace these fancy schmancy math manipulatives that we have in our classrooms. But little side note, many of our kids now have their own student kits. So they may be bringing manipulatives home anyway. So you might have those fancy manipulatives at home, but if not, I've got some alternatives that we can use. So first of all, some of the most common manipulatives that we use in mathematics in elementary school, well, some of them are dominoes, rulers, dice. Those are things that are pretty easy for us to find. Many of us have like dice or dominoes with game boards that we have, or you can go to the Dollar Tree and you can find those pretty easily. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to actually share, excuse me, some printable versions. So if you don't have access to that, you can find some of that. You can also find online versions of these things. Snap cubes. These are snap cubes, and they basically they're a little cube that have like little holes, and then one side has like a little part that will stick or click into that the other cube's holes. And you can build some different things with those. So if I don't have snap cubes at home, well, first let's talk about the purpose of a snap cube in math. Well, sometimes we use them to build trains like you see here, where we might be looking at two parts. So it's nice when we have different colors and we can say, okay, we have 4 and we have 6. 4 and 6 is 10, and I can count all of them and I can see the two add-ins and the sum. Well, let's think about that. Yes, it's nice to have these fancy trains, but if I have like Fruit Loops or Tricks or anything that has multiple colors, I could just build a train with 2 different colors, and I can model some of that same thinking. Sometimes we use it because it's nice because we can snap it together. Well, a lot of us have Lego sets at home. They might not be cubes, but you can still get that same idea of kind of like a tower of snapping apart and apart together to get a whole. But let's talk about maybe 5th grade. Sometimes we use cubes or 4th or 3rd grade to show area. We might build like an area. Well, then we could still use some of those same things. We could use and just build arrays like rows and columns of things. But in 5th grade, we talk about volume. So we want it to be 3-dimensional, and they're fun because you can build those in math. But you know what? We don't all have those. So think about things you have around the house that are in the shape of little cubes, like cheese cubes. You could cut up a thing of cheese, or again, you could use sometimes bigger things like Kleenex boxes and things like that. Another thing we do is to fill a container with these cubic units. And so you could use smaller cubes to fill in bigger cubes. So what about geosolids? These are great for our younger kids when they're learning their shapes. Well, guess what? We have these all over our house. Like here's a Kleenex box. I bet you have some balls maybe in the garage or out back. Most of us have soup cans or pop cans or things like that around the house. 2-sided counters we use for, again, showing parts and holes. A lot of times we use 10 frames, which is basically just a rectangle that's been divided into 5 columns and 2 rows, and we can make 10. So in this case, we have 4 and 6, that gives us 10. We could use all one color and just try to make 10s depending on the grade. Well, I don't know about you, but I have a collection of odd buttons sitting around. Every time I buy like a shirt or a pair of pants, I get a button with that. And so I have a little container of buttons. You could use pennies, especially for the little ones if we're counting. Those water bottles, use the tops from your water bottles as counters. Those work nice too. And you can even color them with a marker if you want to show 2 different colors. Another manipulative that we use a lot at school are square tiles or colored tiles. These are great for our 3rd graders who are learning about multiplication, and we can build arrays, which are rows and columns to show area. We'll get a lot of our cereal are in the shape of a square. Some of us have Post-it notes at home, which usually come in packs that have some different colors in them. And if nothing else, of course, this became a very rare commodity about a year ago, but we have toilet paper squares if we have to. We could build arrays with that, and the kids would think that was really silly and funny, but you could build those rows and those columns. Base 10 blocks are great. These are things, beans are pretty cheap at the grocery store. The fancy base 10 blocks are cubes, and then those 10 of those cubes are put together to make a rod, and then 10 of those rods are put together to make what we call a flat. You can use these for learning your place value, like 1s, 10s, and 100s. You can also use it with your older kids for decimals. Instead of this being 100, this is now 1. This is now 1/10, and this is now 1/100th. But you can replicate that using beans and popsicle sticks. The individual beans are your ones. Glue 10 of them on a stick, that's your 10 rod. And then you put 10 of those sticks together. You could glue them on paper or just put them, like lay them together. There's your hundreds. Fraction bars and fraction tiles are great. Those are easy to make at home too. If you take a couple different colors of paper, you can actually cut a strip. And then when you cut that strip, let me show you just real quick how easy it is to do. If you cut those strips, what you can do is you can fold them. This is one hole, and then get another color, and now it's folded in half. Cut right where you folded, and then right on each of these pieces 1/2. And then you could fold them again and get 1/4, and again get 1/8. You could then start over again with thirds and 6 and talk about. So fraction bars are pretty easy to create. Candy bars are great for fractions. I love to think about pizza and pie and cake when we're talking about fractions. So things that we have around the house. So another common manipulative are pattern blocks. The last part of this just shows you that there are, if you don't want to use those ones that they can touch, which is always really nice, there are websites that have virtual manipulatives that you can your kids can interact with on their laptops. And then we also have printable manipulatives. You can ask your classroom teachers for a printable set. And we have a K2 and a 3-5 set, but they have versions that you can print and cut out to use at home. So what else can I do to promote the love of math at home? I know we're about out of time, so let's just talk about this. But I think this is really important because we want math to be a fun family affair. We don't want it to be a frustrating time. We want it to be a fun time. So play games with your child. Many board games, card games, dice games, domino games involve math. Cook and bake together. Take your child grocery shopping and have them estimate the cost of your cart. Ask them to figure out their schedules, thinking about elapsed time, like you have to be at school at this time. It takes us this many minutes to get there. What time do we need to set the alarm, or what time do we need to leave the house? Make sure you have some analog clocks, the round ones with the numbers and the arms, and not just digital clocks, because you can just when you think of it, just say, hey, what time is it? And have them look at that clock and tell you the time. Ask them to figure out how much change you should get back from the drive-through, which I know right now is hard because of COVID. They don't want money, they want cards everywhere. But that's a fun way to just have them think on, do some mental math, and then have them estimate amounts of things around the house. How many chips do you think are in this bag? How tall do you think that door is? And just random things that you could have them estimate about. Speaking of estimating, we have some activities. I have some links that I'll share. I know we're out of time, but I had you do some games. Well, some of you who were here when we first started, I had this up. Which one doesn't belong? There's actually a book about that. But there's a website as well that has all kinds of these where there's 4 different things. Some of them are shapes, some of them are numbers. They have some with graphs, but every single one of these could be the correct answer. They all have a reason why they don't belong, and they all have a reason why they do belong. It's all about talking about what you see. There's another great website called Estimation 180 that has kids looking at just everyday estimating. And this is just an example of that. I have some really fun websites. Greg Tang Math is great for fluency practice. It's a lot of fun. Khan Academy has some great videos that teach you some of those concepts. This one, Table Talk Math, is a blog that has all kinds of other sites linked to it. There's that Estimation 180. Here's the which one doesn't belong. And so that's where we got here. There's also some other ones. Tools for Teachers is great because it was designed and created here in North Carolina. I also picked out some great books. Sometimes it's nice to just have a book in your hand, but a lot of these you can find on YouTube and have them read. But let me tell you, there are hundreds and hundreds of awesome math books out there. And then if you're really interested in learning more about math and how we're teaching math these days, this is my favorite adult book for math. It's called Becoming the Math Teacher You Wish You'd Had by Tracy Johnston Zager. And I know it says the math teacher, but it really talks about conceptual math and how we want our kids learning math right now. So if you're a reader, that might be a fun book that you'll probably learn some cool things from. But
thank you so much for watching today's Cumberland Family Academy session. If you enjoyed today's session, be sure to visit our website listed below. On the Cumberland Family Academy website, we have numerous other sessions available to you, our families. Remember, our goal is to provide you with information and resources to support the education of your child. Thank you again for watching. Have a great day.